from this luxury business model to a more regional brand that's done it building a flagship, but has broadened their portfolio a little bit to include some higher end offerings. We have Rich and Dan, the co-founders of Harpoon, and they're going to sort of talk about how they were able to become a local icon here in Boston. Anyone who's spent any amount of time here probably can recognize their tap handle and knows that Harpoon IPA is on tap just about everywhere. So they're going to talk about how they did that. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris. How are you? Good. Have a seat. That's all right with you. Yeah, definitely. You grab this. Wow. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Nice to be invited here. Welcome to Boston.
We're running late, and we're the last before lunch, so I think we should probably.
So we'll see how we do with the shot clock. This is kind of this. I've done this before, and we're usually pretty good with it. So we'll see how this goes. I wanted to start out. We've got a lot to cover, and there's two of us, and so we'll go cover as much as quickly as we can today. Just starting out, why did we get into business? Dan and I were friends and beer drinking buddies before we were business partners. It dates back to freshman week in college. And, I guess really from then until the time we thought about starting Harpoon, it was always amazing to us that you could go into a bar and, back then, maybe 6 draft lines was kind of a lot. But each tap had the same beer pouring out of it. It didn't make much sense to us. You could mix the tap. I always thought probably the bar manager would just mix up the tap handles and try to see if you could tell the difference, but because you couldn't, and or I certainly couldn't. So that was the first thing: is why can't beer be more different than this? And the second thing was there was one brewery in all of New England then. This is in 1985 when we were thinking about this, which was the AB Brewery in Merrimack, New Hampshire. Like, wait a second, the beer kind of is all similar. There's one big brewery. There's no small breweries. There's no local connection from the drinkers to the brewery. Something isn't working here. Something doesn't fit. So that's the original idea for us getting into the business.
And things we've done ever since, we've tried to remain consistent to that initial vision, and it's been a challenge over times. But operationally, as we've grown and added brewing capacity, we have tried to do so in a way that's consistent with our founding vision and our approach to the business. Our main brewery in Boston, same space we've been in since 1987, is a city brewery, a 70-year-old ex-Navy facility that certainly presents unique challenges from an operating perspective. But again, location was absolutely key to us in opening the first brewery in Boston in more than 20 years. We invested early in an underdeveloped part of the city, which is now kind of the sweet spot in the city. But one of the key reasons was we wanted it to be accessible to consumers, because from the very beginning, it's been very important to us that our customers be able to come and interact with us directly. We've grown capacity in a tight, as I said, 75-year-old former Navy building from 1,200 barrels to 180,000 barrels. Our lease space has grown from 5,000 to 47,000 square feet. In that same expanded space, we're on our third brew house, our third racking line, our second bottling line, and as of a couple of months ago, our first canning line. And I guess, the question is, would it have been cheaper and in some ways easier to move to a greenfield site? Of course, from a business perspective, it would have been, but that would not have been consistent with who we are as a local icon here in Boston. And most importantly for us, we've grown from about 3 visitors a week when we started to over 100,000 a year in the last several years. Another aspect of staying local and keeping the focus local has been controlling our own distribution rights. We're lucky in Massachusetts to have the ability to self-distribute, and we run that business for ourselves in the Boston metropolitan area, which is between 20 and 25% of our business still. So it's very, very important to us. We will deliver approaching 600,000 CEs, so it's a sizable business for us. And strategically, it keeps us very close to our customers in our key home market, to our key retailers and to our longest served customers. Another benefit for us in the business is it provides us with an understanding of the challenges faced by our wholesale partners in other markets. In 2000, we had kind of expanded that local footprint. We'd always viewed our home market as New England by purchasing the ex-Catamount Brewery up in Windsor, Vermont. For us, it was a perfect opportunity, a perfect marriage, if you will, of our need for more capacity at that time, with an ability to deepen and broaden our roots in northern New England. And it was appropriate, in another sense, appropriate home for the Catamount brands, given the similar history that we shared with them as craft brewing pioneers in New England. Over the ensuing 13 years, we've taken a similar approach to improving our capacity and quality up there and making the brewery very welcoming to visitors. Now over 200,000 people a year visit the brewery to go to the Riverbend Taps and Beer Gardens, take a tour, or attend one of our festivals, or participate in one of our charitable athletic events. So like in Boston, we have burrowed very deeply into the fabric of the local community.
Okay. So the original idea being making great beer and having a brewery that people can visit, well, that's really the same thread that we are work today. And so over the years, we've developed, well, we started giving tours really the first week or so we were in business. That's always been very important to us, as it is to other breweries. I think now, in Boston and opening up our Beer Hall and Visitors Center, we now can, and building a catwalk system over the brewery, we can now do tours 7 days a week. So again, still keeping up with our mission of opening up the brewery to people. You now can visit the brewery, see it in operation 7 days a week, and then have a beer afterwards. And that really is very consistent with our vision. That's really what we've been driving all these years. And as Dan kind of mentioned, but I'll just kind of put the numbers together, we'll have over 120,000 people doing tours and visits to Vermont, and over 200,000 here. So, we'll have between 300,000 and 350,000 people visiting our breweries and interacting with us, and that's a lot of people, and that's a lot of impressions, and it's a great opportunity and responsibility for us to deliver on that, so that people have a great experience and have a positive impression of our company, our brand, and our beers. So I think that's number one. Our events, something we started in 1990 at a time when I thought we might be going out of business, and sort of wanted to do an event before we did. It's like, well, we did this brewery to be a local brewery and do all the things local breweries are supposed to do, so let's do this event. And it was really the only time that we've thrown kind of a Hail Mary pass. It wasn't because we thought it was going to be great. We just thought, let's do it before we can't do it. So that's worked out well, and was the first Oktoberfest in 1990, and that's certainly become an iconic event in and of itself. And we do 5 large events, 3 in Boston, 2 in Vermont. And again, it has a lot to do with the culture of the company. All the people who work the events are our full-time employees. So I think it's a great way for us to stay close to our customer, for our customers to get to know us as well. Years ago, like 12, 13 years ago, I was looking for a way of doing a customer loyalty program. And the fact that we didn't have the actual connection with us and the retailer, there was a retailer piece that was going to be difficult to incorporate. Instead of doing a loyalty program on purchases at retail, we did something, the Friend of Harpoon program, which is a way for us to kind of give things that are exclusive to them and reward them, but not specifically for buying product, but just sort of a brand halo kind of a thing. And that's developed into a 135,000 person group that is active and that we communicate with in all 26 states that we do business in. So kind of a precursor to targeted social media. We've been doing it for a while. We certainly now have upgraded and are doing much more in the Twitter and Facebook world. And it's kind of, it's something that, again, has enabled us to reach people in further markets and have that sense of intimacy between the brewery and the drinker that you might not get 1,500 miles away as easily. So that's been great. I think the other thing for us has been to be very engaged in the community. Our Harpoon Helps program is something that we're very proud of and reaches into a lot of different things. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but that's another way that we've kind of fulfilled our mission of being a local brewer that's engaged and open to customers?
I think building on what Rich said about the culture, nurturing a company culture that's consistent with the business values and objectives that we have is absolutely essential. And I guess I would argue that there's nothing more important that Rich and I have to do every day at the company than doing that. And I'd say, speaking candidly, that doing so in a company of well over 200 full and part-time employees is a real challenge. The Harpoon culture is a communal reflection of over 200 individuals who, the unifying themes, they love beer, are self-motivated, can work well alone or in teams, know how to act professionally, and ultimately treat others as they themselves like to be treated. How do we protect and nurture this culture? We manage the business for our strong performers. We do not grease the squeaky wheel, we replace them. We revel in our beer, love life is not just something for the external market, it's something that we live every day at Harpoon. We work together as a company on a regular basis at Harpoon Festival, athletic events, Harpoon Helps missions, and I really can't overemphasize the importance of that. We do that several times each year, and where you mix up everybody at the company working side by side in jobs you don't normally have, it's a wonderful equalizer, and the post-event parties are looked forward to really the rest of the year. In addition, I just got back Friday from a week-long employee beer culture trip to Europe. Every spring we take employees when they hit their 5th anniversary, 8th, 12th, and then every 5 years thereafter on a week-long beer culture trip to Europe. This was the 15th year that we've done this. We visit breweries, we drink a lot of beer, and the one mantra of the trip is what happens on the trip stays on the trip. So not many of the stories come back, but there's a real buzz at the brewery this week with what happened last week in Poland. The end result is a culture that feels alive. It speaks. Bad hires are rejected by the culture. They don't have to be sought out. Processes get improved. A great example of how our culture is alive is what happened recently with the terrorist attacks here in Boston and our response to that. We could have just written a check or brewed a beer and sold the proceeds, but there was a real ferment, if you will, within the company that let's do something communally, which is a way that we always do something. So we did these Brewed for Boston nights at our beer hall, where employees basically were rushing to sign up to volunteer their labor to work at those events. All the proceeds were donated to the one fund. And again, this is something that kind of came up organically. There's a real sense of ownership in New England within our company, within our culture, and we wouldn't have been able to sustain it if we'd not been able to do that.
One topic I'm going to talk about that Chris had brought up to me is the issue of developing a product line, a brand with a flagship. Does that good? Is that bad? Does that hinder innovation? How do you build off that? So I guess, first of all, I'm going to ask a question. How many of you are pro football fans? Just want to get a sense of how. Okay, terrific. Maybe some of you watched the draft, okay. All right, so pro football, I'm going to do this analogy. To me, this issue of the flagship is a little bit like asking a football GM, do you need an elite quarterback to win in the NFL? And if you have an elite quarterback, you definitely kind of smile and kind of go, yeah, it really helps. If you don't, you go, no, well, our quarterback's really good, and he can move the ball down the field, and we have a couple of 3 other, or in some teams' cases, 4 other guys that might be able to step in. But I think it's a little bit like that. It depends on the cards that you've been played as somebody running a brewery and running a brand. So I think for us, we didn't find our flagship found us, and it's always been the result. Now I'll go through a couple of sequences here. It's always been the result of innovation that our flagships found us. And so originally we came out with Harpoon Ale in 1987, which, as I tell people, was an extreme beer back then. In the bud drinking community of 1987, this was a really surprising product, and people would look at it and taste it and kind of shrink back. And that's a long time ago in beer years. Harpoon IPA we came out with in the summer of '93. And it was going to be a summer season. It was a summer seasonal beer, and it was an extreme beer. Now you're a 42 IBU beer in 1993. It's a lot of bitterness. And I thought, well, some people are going to like it, some people aren't. It's a summer seasonal beer. It'll make a statement. it's kind of a tribute to Pacific Northwest style that isn't in this market at all. We'll give it, let's make a statement. And it became our flagship. It outstripped Harpoon Ale within a year. And so, again, it wasn't a conscious decision. It was innovation that led to success. Similarly, in 1988, we were in our first full year of bottling here. And, as the summer season came down, I realized, well, we're not going to be selling as much beer this winter. So we thought, oh, okay. Again, another thing local breweries can do or do in other parts of the world is do seasonal beers. So much like doing the event, let's do seasonal beers. And back then, in the late '88, there were two Christmas beers in this market. One was Coors Winterfest, the other was Anchor Christmas Ale. So we started making Harpoon Winter Warmer our first seasonal beer, and this was it. Spices, it had, people would look at us, if the Harpoon Ale was testing their taste buds, Harpoon Winter Warmer was like in another planet. Like, who are you guys? What are you doing? And so again, we innovated. We came up with something that, again, we thought was consistent with being a local brewery, and it became, our seasonal beer became our second most important product, our highest selling product, and again led to later on the development of our summer seasonal beer IPA, which again is our flagship. So I think that's something else. Again, in unfiltered beers, we started making a Hefeweizen in the mid '90s, and again became our third best selling product. And we began to play around with whites, and our UFO White became so popular it kind of came in and outstripped UFO Hefe as the leader of that brand of UFO. So again, I think to me the flagships are a blessing, not a curse, to anybody with a brand, and they've come about for us through the innovation process, not through any conscious decision to create something like that.
I think it's interesting, and it's certainly highlighted at a session like this, and it's a wonderful business in so many ways, but to sit back and listen to the way different folks have achieved success in a big, broad industry like this is kind of fascinating to watch, especially when we've been fortunate enough to get to know some of these very smart, talented people personally. But I think we face some big questions in the category as it gets increasingly crowded and competitive and somewhat chaotic about who we are and what we stand for, and what do we want to be when we grow up? Do we want to be the next Budweiser? Do we want to sell beer in all 50 states? Are we driven to sell beer in Europe, even though we have to change our code dates so that instead of being 4 to 6 months, which we know is right, we have to go to 1 and maybe even 2 years in those markets, which we have seen when we've traveled over there? Do we want to make flavored malt beverages? I think there are some real questions that each one of us as craft brewers face, and in interacting with our consumers, I think it's important that we give them answers to those questions as to why we are in this business ultimately. And I think, needless to say, it should be a fascinating conversation, which, Chris, you can host at some other point. We probably don't have enough time to get into that, but for us at Harpoon, we pride ourselves on our focus and our commitment to our founding vision from the mid-1980s to make great beer, share it with friends and neighbors, and being a local icon.
Speaking of that, so if you want to, one of the questions again that Chris posed to us is, so anybody out there who wants to aspire to reading a regional brewer or being a local icon or that kind of thing, what are the things I would think are important to that? And I think first of all is patience. That's not going to happen overnight. People want to see, you got to grow into a community. You can't just sort of announce yourself and be, a local icon. I think secondly is authenticity. If that's what you aspire to, then be what you say you're going to be. Brew your beer there, have people over to visit and see and experience that, and also I think be somebody who is of community service, and so serving your community, whether that's through charitable activity or other things, I think those are all part of being a local icon. Looking at the future, a couple of things come to mind. I think the near future is difficult in the craft industry. I think a couple of different factors there. There's crowded shelves certainly is number one. So increased competition and a lot of noise, and that makes it difficult for wholesalers, retailers, and consumers to kind of see through the mist. The way I've talked to our sales force, one analogy that I've used is that of, I do like sports analogies, so I hope you do too, but is that of a NASCAR driver. And as I look at it, we're kind of a little bit, we're driving along, there are going to be accidents and crashes, and we just have to make sure we avoid that and drive through the smoke and come out the other side, because that's really what we're seeing. That's what in the 2013 we'll have plenty of wrecks on the oval this year. A couple of things, the increased competition and SKUs coming kind of from all over will reduce the ability of craft brewers to increase prices to reflect cost increases. So obviously there's margin compression. You've already seen that when people are making public company announcements, but private companies, they just keep quiet about it. But they still have margin compression. And I think, one other thing to look at that, again, was pretty apparent in the 90s, and I think the analogy holds today, is look at the attitude of people leading these companies as to where they want to be in 2 years or 10 years. I think you kind of divide it. I look at people in different categories. One are the people who are looking to cash out. So that's rapid growth is what they tend to look for, and rapid expansion. I think other people are more patient and are really looking, I would say, like Dan and I, are people who, we don't have a succession plan because we don't really want to leave. We like what we do. We're in the business we want to be in. We enjoy the company we have. Someday we have to do something else, or other people are going to have to do what we do, but we're trying to put that day off. And I think that our behavior in the market will be different than people who are in that first category. So we wanted to share with you a few pictures now, besides this nice bottle cap picture. 20 years of IPA. Well, we talked about the flagship. We're celebrating that this year. What's that?
I can't sing.
Oh, okay. Well, that's just, we've got various things going on. I won't get into all of that. Again, a nice just sort of a subliminal or not so subliminal IPA ad here. This is a picture of our brew house in Boston. Would you like to
Yes,
talk
that's
about these next
the building. They used to build destroyers here down in the waterfront. So the nice thing, that's 45-foot ceilings. So 27 years ago, it was great space, and we've just kept adding and fitting things. We had about a half-inch to fit the ladder ton in when it came from Germany 10 years ago. This
is the view you get. This is sort of the first view you get on our tour.
And that's our Harpoon Brewery up in Windsor, Vermont. The Connecticut River is in the background there, and those far hills are actually in New Hampshire. It's a beautiful facility.
Here's some barrels numbers over the years from 87 through 2012, and the bottle caps representing the two breweries. Here's our market area in red, and no, I'm not going to answer any questions about Mississippi. Just brewery visits, again, just totaling up. Boston festivals, 34,000, kind of adds up who came to us last year. Beer hall, you want to talk about?
It's a beer hall that just opened in February.
Many of you came last night.
That's right, the reception last night, and again, kind of the culmination of our vision to make our breweries centerpieces in how we present ourselves to the public. And every time we see anyone, the first thing or last thing we leave them with is, please come visit us at the brewery, so we can getting back to some of the things that drove Rich and I into the business, which was the communal aspect of the local breweries in Europe, which they were part of the community, and they weren't off in some industrial park buried someplace out in the middle of no place just because they logistically were good for freight. No. This was in the heart of the city, or very accessible, and it was come on down and drink the freshest beer possible.
Again, this is just some tour pics. Here's just a sense for those of you who have not been to any of our festivals. Here's kind of an aerial view of one of our events. Beautiful. Nice to see all those people having fun. Harpoon helps. Again, just some statistics on this. You know, we raised directly $533,000, so those were checks that we wrote. Nonprofits effective, over 300. States were in 12. Pints donated of beer, not pints of blood, pints of beer. Gift packs, volunteer, in-kind donations about 300,000. So total about $830,000.
And it's great to be part of an industry, you know, we know what Jim has done. You hear what people do in the industry, and collectively, I mean, it seems to be in the DNA of all of us, because we read it in industry publications about being charitable and supportive of communities. It's wonderful to be in an industry where this is such an important aspect of what we do.
This was the Cupid Splash.
You did not come to this. This was swimming in Boston Harbor in February. It was cold.
And these are just two. This is our big Boston fundraiser, which is the 5 miler. It's 3,500 people running this event in May coming up. And here's the point to point, which is a long 112 miles in Vermont, an unforgiving 5-hill climb. So I hope to be rehabbed back into this in August. My knee has been a little problem, but I should be back for this. So those are just some picks. Oops. Okay. And that's what we wanted to say. So thank you.